Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Kathy Barnette show. I am so very grateful to each and every one of you. Now, you guys know my whole mission is to just have a conversation. We don't talk with each other, we talk at each other for the most part. People come with their sides already made up, their opinions already made up, and there is no presentation of the facts. So I want to be able to bring great conversations to you. And you guys know the drill. Hit the subscribe button, followed by the notification button, then leave a comment and share. All of it works. Trust me, the algorithms are real. With me is two people. We have James Arthur Ray and his lovely wife, Miss Bersabeth Ray. Hello, guys. How you doing?
Hi.
Great. Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you both so very much for coming on. And as I said in the intro, I want this to be a conversation. So less of an question answer and let's have a conversation. Let's get to know one another. And in doing so, let me read a little bit of both of your bios because I think it's very interesting. I think you guys are going to like this. So let me talk about you, Mr. James. James Arthur is a New York Times best-selling author, philosopher, and consultant who has worked with over 1 million people from 146 countries through his coaching and leadership programs. James is the author of 6 books and has appeared on numerous TV shows, including Oprah, Larry King, and The Today Show. In 2009, he lost everything after a tragic accident and became homeless with $20 million in debt. He has since rebuilt his life using the same strategies he teaches his clients. His story is told in the CNN documentary Enlighten Us. Ray is on a mission to positively impact a minimum of 1 billion lives and businesses worldwide. That is a goal, a plan, a purpose. A very interesting one. When I saw 1 billion, I don't know if you guys know, right now trending on Twitter is 1 billion. Now, by the time this particular show airs, it will the interview between President Donald Trump and Elon Musk have already taken place. They have over 1 billion hits. So when I read your bio of 1 billion, it reminded me of the impact of 1 billion lives, right? That is huge. But let me tell you also, guys, about Miss Bersabeth. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Miss Bersabeth was born in Iran in 1981. During the Iran-Iraq War, growing up, her childhood disappeared into a cloud of death, violence, sexual abuse, and instability. She experienced many traumatic events, such as witnessing the military force take her parents when she was only 4 years old. Her family escaped to Pakistan when she was 7 and eventually smuggled themselves to the United States. She faced many challenges growing up, such as not speaking English, falling into gang behavior and drug culture. Bersabeth was in abusive relationships for years before finding the self-confidence and courage to leave. In 2013, she met James, and she helped him rebuild his life after he lost everything. As an intuitive consultant, Bersabeth helps people heal from their past and take their power back. Generally, I tend to talk about politics, things that are going on all around us on air. But what I have found over probably the past couple of years is that that is not the whole me when I'm just talking about politics, but that there's so much more. And working as a Republican consultant with the presidential campaign, running my own very competitive senatorial campaign here in Pennsylvania against Dr. Oz, that was a tool, but it wasn't the whole me. And so when I read your bios, both of you, I said to myself, this is a whole life experience. I'm sure you guys have gone through a little bit of everything, not just from the world of politics, but your mind, how you think, how you feel, a little bit of everything. So I wanted to invite you, and I just want to have a conversation so you can tell us a little bit about your lives.
Well, thank you. We love to do that. And where would you like to begin?
Yeah, where should we start?
Because
I mean, it's so
we
many
can dive
places
in
to
anywhere.
start. It's so many places to start. One, I already said the 1 billion. I mean, like, that's not a goal people just kind of, like, oh, my purpose in life is to impact 1 billion lives. And now looking at it trending on Twitter, like, this is a lot of people that you're
Mhm.
impacting. But also with you, Bersabeth, right now, again, this show is being pre-recorded, but we're hearing conversations that Iran, it is imminent that they're going to attack Israel. And apparently everyone is just sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for it, right? I don't
Mm,
understand that logic. But then you
yeah,
mentioned Pakistan, and I'm thinking about what just happened in Bangladesh. And you having to escape and come here to America. Are you a legal resident? We're talking about that in our culture from an
sure,
illegal perspective. There's so many places to start and stop. I just figure I'm going to let you tell your story a little bit, both of you, if you don't mind.
sure.
Okay, you want to start since he's brought up Iran and
Since we're
what you see. She can see things a little bit more clearly than those of us who were born in America, in my opinion,
Mm,
because of her past. So
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest things that I've learned is, well, I grew up in an environment where you don't trust your government.
right.
The government is not for you. The people are for each other, which is the unfortunate case is that here they're using the people to turn against each other
Right.
and to trust into the government. And what I find here is we got too comfortable. And when we get too comfortable and we're used to an easy life, should I say, then we start taking things for granted. And once that happens, we start giving away our freedoms to things for the so-called safety and
Mm.
protection. When
You know what, Bersabeth?
Yeah,
Allow me to interject if you don't mind, because
sure.
you've mentioned a couple of things. Because one, I wrote out on Twitter, several weeks ago, I no longer trust my government. And I
Yeah.
think most people feel that way when you look at UK right now and the
Mhm,
citizens all around UK uprising against their government. You see Bangladesh, people are not trusting their government when you see Sheikh Hasina and what's happening there. So you see that kind of common thread across the world. But also, and what you just said, what was the last part you just said? Oh, about safety. I had a girlfriend who was from Poland, and
mhm,
she said what the government, because they were free or they had some sense of freedom. I don't know if it was a democracy or a republic then, but she said they were free.
mhm.
But inch by inch, they lost those freedoms. And the narrative the government said was, just give us this amount of freedom. It's for your safety. It's
Yeah.
for your safety.
Mhm.
Don't worry. Take the
Yeah.
shot. Take the jab. It's for your safety.
Yeah.
Trust us. And
Mhm.
before you know it, she was recounting the story of why her and her family fled Poland is because the government came in, kicked down the door, and dragged out her father and her brother into the middle of the street.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know, like that just resonated with me that it doesn't seem like it seemed like like there's a playbook on how to take free people and subjugate them.
yeah,
Mhm.
I'm reminded of one of the great philosophers, David Hume, who
Mm-hmm.
was very well known during the Enlightenment period. And
Right.
I'm not going to be able to quote it exactly, but I can give you the flavor of what he said. He said, "The loss of freedom is such an ominous and frightening thing for most people that it has to be taken away a little bit at a time." And
Mm,
that's what comes up for me is you're talking about what you're talking about. I mean, I little by little,
Mhm.
and we can go way back. It seems more prominent right now because things are reaching a pitch. But even in September 11th, we with the TSA being formed for our safety.
mm-hmm.
Bersabeth and I flew to Miami recently on business, and they they patted down my entire body, including my crotch, and I was like, wait a second, they can ransack your bag
Yeah.
and leave it in all disarray. And, that's unconstitutional. It really is. They can't do that without a search warrant, but they do. And we allow it. And it's happened little by little. It's insidious. It creeps up on us a little bit at a time.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't be able to see it probably as clearly as I can now had I not been in the crosshairs of it in my own life. And Bersabeth is able to see it much earlier than I was because of what she grew up in. And she, I was sold the American dream and all the freedoms that we have and the liberties that we have.
Sure.
And I believed it. When I was growing up as a kid, if someone said something on the news, you believed it. It was true.
Yeah.
And now you have to question everything. And so little by
It
little,
feels like it's intentional. Is it intentional, Bersabeth, coming from where you're coming from and looking at, if you follow the breadcrumbs backwards, is it intentional to create such disinformation that you don't know what's true? Is that a part of the ultimate demise of a republic or a democracy?
I would say I'm leaning towards more yes of recent times. Just if you pay attention with what's going on, even with social media, because they're allowing, for example, X, for everyone to post everything and anything. Now, and you can see it in real time, where you get the all the headings that comes out in the main media, and then you have people on X sharing it, or you've actually like Trump and Elon Musk speaking. You heard it, then the next day you see all the headlines. It doesn't match. They're lying. It's it's totally obvious in front of our faces. So you have to think, given where I come from, I go, wait a minute. There's something funny going on about this. It's almost like they want to create this what's the word? Confusion inside of us, where we trust nothing anymore. And when we feel confused, we're more fragmented than we already are, because of the way that we've been programmed into this system, a system built on lies. They run the people because of that. And the last straw is creating confusion. They're creating that with the so-called gender, what they're doing with women. They're doing that with the whole transgender movement. All that does is create confusion in people, that drives them from their center, which we call your spot where you connect with God. And the more we get further away from that, the more fragmented we are, the less we are in our power. And the good news is, though, the way that they're going at it so intensely after us should tell us how powerful we are as individuals if we come from that place. And that's what we've gone further away from as time goes on with everything that's going on. And at the same time, it's awakened people to go, wait a minute, there's so much evil and darkness going on that you have no choice but to believe in God now. You have no choice to come back to center.
yeah,
That's what Donald Trump said last night, and again, we're pre-recording this, so it would be a little dated by the time the rest of you hear this particular conversation. But in the podcast on X between Elon Musk and Donald Trump opened it up with, like, if you didn't believe there was a God before I got shot, you should believe there's a God. He said, I believed before, but now I really believe, right? And I mean, there's so much you said that I can start with. My daughter, I'm studying the book of Isaiah again for the second time. And I was telling my daughter about last night, right around chapter 40, 42 of the book of Isaiah, God calls out this man named Cyrus. And he does so, I believe it was like 150 years. Don't fact check me on that. But like 150 years, it was a long time.
Yeah.
Like over 100 years before Cyrus actually came on the scene in Persia, modern day
Yeah.
Iran.
imagine
And
that.
he called him by name. He said, this is my man. He's a tool in my hand, and I'm going to use him to deliver my people. And then 150 plus years later, you have Cyrus on the scene, God named them, called them by name. And Cyrus does what no king at that point had ever done before, which was to release their captives to go back to their homeland versus spreading them out
Mm-hmm.
and forcing them to assimilate into the new culture. And as I'm telling my daughter this story, she's 15, she said, Mom, why do people not believe there's a God? Like, can't they clearly see there's a God? And
Mm-hmm.
I remind her what I've told her and her brother for years now. What did Satan tempt Eve with? That
Yeah.
you can be God.
God.
And in fact, and I'm gonna stop talking in a minute and let you guys respond to this. But in fact, and then my daughter goes on to say what my husband and I have been teaching them is that it really comes down to, if I believe there is a God, that there is someone who's sovereign, that all of this has been determined, and I am a tool in his hand, then I have to ask the next question: what does he want from me?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe I will have to give that over to him. Versus if I pretend there is no God, then I get to be God in my own life, or erect some God,
Mm-hmm.
i.e. man or system or government, to basically tell me what to do, because that's much easier than me having to think and rule my own life.
Well,
Absolutely.
I
totally,
said a
totally
lot
agree.
there.
You know, you did, and you might be aware my latest book is titled God, Money, and Sex, and the subtitle is Understanding and Mastering the Three Human Dilemmas.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk a lot about these things in the God section because it's very, very apparent that we, going all the way back to the humanistic movement, that we have gotten way more into secularism and away from God. And I use metaphorically the idea of the vertical principle, which is a metaphor because the Christ said the kingdom of heaven is within. It's not up in a cloud somewhere. But vertical principle and a horizontal principle. And when you disconnect from the vertical principle, the fact is every single human being needs a hierarchy. In fact, every single being needs a hierarchy. If you look at animals, they always have a hierarchy, and we need a hierarchy. We need something as a guiding principle, a controlling principle. And if you go back to my childhood, that was God. And we've gotten so disconnected from that. And so when you disconnect from that vertical principle, controlling principle of God, then all you have left is what I call the horizontal plane, which is the secular world. And what do we look for a
And how
hierarchy?
is that working out for us?
It's not. And that's the whole thrust of the book. This is where we are and this is why. And here's the solutions for us to get beyond it. Because what are we looking for to as God? Well, we're looking to athletes. We're looking to celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
We're kneeling at the altar of money and materialism. And it's gotten us to exactly where we are. Now, I believe you, and I agree with you, and we have to ask ourselves, if God has a plan, which I believe God does, then what's my part in it, and what does he want from me? The second thing we need to ask in our experience is, what's the purpose of what's happening right now?
Yeah.
Because it's not random and it's not just pure chaos.
No.
But I was
Every
going to ask you that, when I look at what's happening in Venezuela, is, people being murdered in the street. You look at what happened in Bangladesh. The people thought they were overturning one government for something better. Looks like that may not be the case. They may not be getting something better. You look at what's happening with Israel. Now you have Turkey with Erdogan saying, I think I'm going to get in this fight against Israel. You have what's happening in Ukraine, between Russia, what's going on in the UK, what's going on in our own borders here. And I say to myself, I went to bed and woke up in literal hell breaking loose all around the country, all around the world. And I have to ask myself, is it just coincidental that, this was literally Monday night, I went to bed. Tuesday morning, I wake up and everything I just said to you, it's like I wrote down like 10 different things was happening at the exact same time. Is this coincidental? Is this by design? is there someone who is orchestrating all of this on the good and the bad side? Help us understand.
Well, you ask about 5 questions there, and I'd say yes, 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 and yes, pretty much. But if I can dissect and break it down, is there something controlling this? Well, in our opinion, we're not in a war against liberals and conservatives. We're not in a
Agreed.
war, and this is our experience. I shouldn't say opinion. It's stronger than that. It's experience. We're not in a war for Republicans and Democrats. We're not in a war against Russia and Ukraine or China or Iran. We're in a spiritual war. And if you read the Bible and every great spiritual tradition, they all reference this. It's not news. Read the book of Revelations, which I've done recently. What a read. And there are powers that are beyond our sensory factors. We live in a 5% world. Science proves this. After the point, as far back as we can trace scientifically, 95% of what exists here is vibrating at a frequency that we don't have the sensory acuity to perceive it. And so we're operating in a 5% world. And they state that in many traditions. Well, when you say the 5% world is all there is, then you're missing 95% of what actually is. And so there are other forces and other powers that are at war right now. And the war is reaching a feverish pitch. And I'm not an optimist. I'm not a pessimist. I believe Bersabeth and I do our best to be activists, which an activist to me is right in the middle between optimism, saying, "Oh, everything's great all the time," which sometimes it's just not, or pessimism, the glass is always half empty, which no, that's not a great view either. Activism is right in the middle, and yet I'm still keeping the faith because I'm looking at the behavior right now. I'm looking at a man, and I have personal experience of this, and that's why I can talk to it from my own experience, and I can share that with you about how the so-called justice system came after me with guns blazing. And I look at what's happening to imagine for a moment a 75-year-old man who's never committed a crime, who's always been an upstanding citizen, who's always contributed to society. And in 2 years, he gets 32 prosecutions. He decides to be a criminal after 75 years. Excuse me, that doesn't make any sense. But what does make sense is that the dark forces are losing. And I believe that because...
Now, how do you know they're losing? Because from where I sit, the world is on fire, and Maduro and Venezuela is not stepping down anytime soon. The UK Prime Minister has ordered a hit on all of these far right wingers, and we can see what's happening here in our own country. It feels very oppressive. So, what tells you that we, the side of light, is overcoming the darkness around us?
It's a great question, and I'll tell you exactly what we believe and what we observe. There's a fundamental principle in this universe that every single breakthrough is preceded by a breakdown. That's a fact. We don't like it. I don't like it either. But I've lived it, and so has Bersabeth. And we're going through the breakdown right now. Sometimes you have to go through hell to get to heaven. And so we're going through the hell right now. We're going through the breakdown. But if the dark forces were really in control, would they be coming after the one individual who is speaking against their agenda? One person. They're scared. They're like a dog. Imagine a dog that's injured, backed into a corner, and you try to approach it, and it goes rabid on you. It does everything. If you go all the way back, this goes way back, way back. We could start at 1913 with the beginning of the Federal Reserve, where they started controlling our money.
Yes.
And we can move forward to the Kennedy assassination and to September 11th and so on and so forth. But I talk about all these things in God, Money, and Sex, but nonetheless, it's been going on for a long time, but it's been much more covert. Yeah. And now it's more overt. And the good news is because it's over, they're scared and they're pulling out all the stops because they don't want to let go of power. And more people are waking up from the nightmare that we're experiencing. I'll just give you this metaphor, Kathy, and then you can take it from there. But, if you ever had a nightmare, and the viewer, if you've ever had a nightmare and you sit up in bed and your heart is pounding and you're sweating and you're breathing rapidly, then you go, oh, it was just a dream. Well, please remember, it was the nightmare that woke you up.
Yeah.
The nightmare is what woke you up. And so consequently, we're going through the nightmare right now. It's not comfortable. It's not going to be comfortable. Quite frankly, we believe it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's going to reach even more fevered pitch as we approach the election. And even if the controlling powers get ousted, it's not going to end. I mean, let's say right now we have Harris against Trump. I don't believe Harris is going to go the distance. I could be wrong, but that's my feeling. I believe they're going to change her out. But nonetheless, let's say it's Harris against Trump. Let's say that Trump wins, and a lot of people are looking for an external savior. They're thinking, oh my God, if Trump wins, then we're not going to have taxes on tips, and he's going to close the borders, and we're going to have all these wonderful things. Well, what did they do to him in 2016?
Yeah.
They
I
hammered
think a
him.
lot of us fell prey to that. I mean, I certainly voted for Donald Trump in 2016. There's no way on God's green earth I would have ever voted for Hillary Clinton or any Democrat for that matter. And I sometimes kick myself because I believe Donald Trump winning in 2016 was a reprieve for our nation. I believe that was grace that God was extending towards us because I think we deserve Hillary. But God gave us grace, right? And during that period of grace, I'm gonna just say me, should have been working. Now, I was doing things and out on Fox those 4 years and, writing and speaking and all of that. But I have to admit that I was very comfortable, very relaxed, kind of what you were saying earlier, Basaba, about being a little too comfortable and laughing at the left, laughing, making jokes about them being snowflakes and not taking the threat seriously when we had that window of opportunity. Then 2020 hit, all hell literally, it feels like break loose on us again. And now we find ourselves behind the 8 ball. And these people seem very determined. They seem to have a very strong grasp on all of the major institutions in this country, and they do not seem to be shy in using their influence and power to get their way. How do you overcome such evil, such determination from the opposition?
Well, I've
think
been Mike Hogan. Go
Mike
ahead.
Hogger. I think that comes back to the individual, to each one of us. I mean, take a situation of your own life that you've gone through hardship, real hardship, and struggled. Where did it lead you at the end was to go back to God, to go back to center in your power. That's when you're truly in your power. And their biggest thing to do to humanity is to scare us. And when we're in fear, we're not in our power. That's when they can control us. And so that's why things are ramping up. It's getting worse. Every country is going to war. We're getting close to World War III. And the one thing that we cannot do is to retreat into fear. Because if we retreat into fear, it's like buying into Satan, what Satan is trying to tell us to do. And you can't do that. We're made in the image of God, meaning that we carry that within us. And what better way to get us back to center than to put us through this whole struggle as a whole of humanity, because the entire world is going through it now. And if each person took the time and said, okay, I'm going to fix myself, and then I'm going to fix my house, and that has no choice but to ripple out into society. And that's how we are where we are today, because little things happen one at a time, just a little bit at a time, for us to go, oh, that's okay. That's not a
I think
problem.
I think one of our Achilles heel is that we're so conditioned to see the grand gestures, the big,
Mhm.
crescendo kind
Yeah.
of moment. But in my own experience, I like how you keep qualifying what you're saying, with saying, James, was by saying my own experience, because you can't tell me what I've experienced. I know what I've experienced, right? And we can learn from that. And from my own experience, I don't know if you guys know much about me and who I am and what I've done, but in 2022, I ran against Dr. Oz
Mm.
and several others here in the state of Pennsylvania and almost won that race. And it wasn't the CNN or the Don Lemons that came after me. It was our own side, right, within the Republican Party that just lied.
Mhm.
Okay, so I didn't prevail. Now I'm like, well, Jesus, what in the world? What happened with that? That was crazy. And
Mhm.
then I started working. I'm the first person Vivek Ramaswamy hires and brings onto his team, and we're doing amazing things. And then he brings on consultants, Republican consultants, and you can map it. He started falling like a rock when they came on and started leading things. And now you find yourself in a position or in a place where you're not doing grand things,
Mhm.
but I'm cooking meals with my family.
There you go.
Our 18-year-old is getting ready to go off to college next week. Of course, by the time you guys see this episode, he will be in college. I am getting back to prayer
Mhm.
and that quiet time and seeking the Lord and trying to find peace without the grand gestures. But what am I supposed to learn? Thank you for what I've learned. I don't want to repeat that lesson again. That was hard, but I see my own failings, my own shortcomings. So I do see that in
Mhm.
order to, and I don't know, I guess I'm in the midst of coming to where you probably are already, is that maybe there are some grand gestures left in my life, but as of right now, this is where I find myself. And how do I become okay with what seems small? But
Mm.
I see the importance of it, but it seems small by the measurement of things.
Sure.
Well, I totally can relate to that, and
Mhm.
let me just give you my life experience. And I don't know how much you know about me. I'm assuming, anybody who's Googled me or looked at Wikipedia, they probably don't think very highly of me because they're not my friends. Google and Wikipedia are not my friends, and they're not going to change. We've attempted to get them changed, and they're not going to change because they have an agenda. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, I took a tremendous fall. I was on Oprah and Larry King and the Today Show once a month for multiple months. I had a New York Times bestseller. I had a 7,500 square foot estate in Beverly Hills on Mulholland Drive. I was worth north of $20 million, and I was on a roll. I was one of the biggest names in the industry at the
Mhm.
time, post The Secret. And I really, it's interesting, Kathy, because in 2006, I asked God to help me expand my message and my impact in the world in a positive way. And then all of a sudden, everything blew up. And I thought, wow, this is God's
That
answer.
sounds like God, boy.
Yeah, this is God's answer to prayer. But here's what's really, really an important lesson for everyone listening is that I got seduced
Mm.
by the Luciferian world. I really did, because all of a sudden why did I need a 7,500 square foot estate as a single guy? I mean, what sense does that make? It makes none. You know, why did I need all the glamour and the glitz, and why was I being offered contracts by Oprah, and I thought it was such a big deal. I really I really got sucked into it. And then I had an incredible fall. It all went away. In a matter of 3 months, it was all gone. And what happened, the short story is that I had an event in Sedona, and there was a horrible accident, and 3 people died in a sweat lodge.
Mhm.
And we'd done that event 5 years prior without a hitch, and it was always just a very small portion of the entire experience of doing what Bersabeth talks about. The work we still do today is to help you find those internal drivers, find your center, and realize what holds you back and what limits you. Well, without going into the whole story, it's quite a ride. But the state of Arizona decided to come after me for a crime. Anyone who looked at it could tell it was an accident. It obviously was an accident. And I kept telling myself and thinking to myself, well, everybody knows who I am and what I'm about, and they're gonna understand that this is not a crime. But they charged me with manslaughter, which is intentional harm. And it was absolutely mind-blowing to me, because which one of us who own a business would intentionally harm one of our clients and think we're going to continue in business? It was just ludicrous. And so, long story short, I went to try. I lost everything. The minute that happened, I went from the media sweetheart to media Satan. And all the major stations, I don't know if you were at Fox at the time, or if Fox participated, but most all of them did. CNN and ABC and NBC certainly did, and they just crucified me, literally crucified me, called me a cult leader and a death cult, and all these kind of things, which were just horrific. And I went to trial, and the state, took me through 4 months of trial. They offered me a plea bargain before the trial began, and said, if you'll plead guilty, then we'll only give you 5 years in prison.
Right.
And I said to my lawyer, you're asking me to plead guilty to intentional death? And he said, no, I'm not asking you that. That's what they're asking. And I said, well, I can't do that. That's a lie. And he goes, I know. And he said, but I'm also bound to tell you that they told me, if you don't accept this, they're going to come after you with every single thing they have.
Yeah.
And they kept their promise. There was 32 counts of prosecutorial misconduct by a DA running for re-election who ran on being tough on crime, and she saw this opportunity to grandstand, quite frankly, and it was a hellacious ride. 32 counts. One count of prosecutorial misconduct is grounds for a mistrial, but there was no mistrial. They were hit with a Brady violation, which was suppression of evidence in my favor, and they were fined. That's grounds for a mistrial. There was no mistrial. The doctor who went through 4,000 pages of medical evidence that we hired from Harvard University, who testified on my side, stated conclusively under oath that it was pesticides that caused the death. Well, the state's whole case was on heat, that James Arthur Ray made it too hot, even though none of them were in there, and there was no thermostat in there, and they don't have any evidence to prove that, but that was their case. Well, he testified it was pesticides. The presenting problems in the ER was foaming at the mouth and dilated pupils. That's not heat related. That's toxin related. And so the DA stood up and said, I don't care if it was pesticides. James Arthur Ray is still guilty. Okay. And so my point is that when I see what's happening with the weaponization of the justice system right now, I'm not surprised at all, because I was one of the harbingers, probably not a harbinger, but in my world, I was a harbinger.
Probably one of the first of many dominoes to fall.
That's right.
Yeah.
Back in 2009. And it was so horrific. I'll just close with this, that I worked with Munger, Tolles, and Olson. They're a very principled law firm, very principled, very law-abiding, very much believing in the Constitution and the laws of the land. And it was so horrific that 2 of my lawyers quit the profession when the jury came down with the verdict. And the verdict was I was acquitted of manslaughter, thank God. They wanted 30 years. I wouldn't be here with you today, Kathy, or with my lovely wife. But they got me for a lesser inclusive, which is part of our system too. They had 2 shots at me, and they got me for negligence. And so I ended up going to prison for 2 years. And when I came out in 2013, you mentioned in my bio, I was $20 million in debt. I was homeless. I was alone. I didn't know my lovely wife then. And I was just broken. I was literally broken and disillusioned. And so all that to say, long answer to your question of
It's not long. It's
what.
perfect. Continue.
Thank you. You mentioned your fall. I'll call that the fall for me. And you had your fall. Bersabeth had her fall. And the fall, read the book of Job. The fall oftentimes is a gift to see what you're really committed to.
Yes.
And to find that courage and that backbone and to get back to the heart. And
And
that's
it gives you wisdom and perspective
it
that
does.
when the next door opens, you walk through it being wiser and smarter, right? And not, by the grace of God, not making those same missteps before. But, and I do prize wisdom. Wisdom, I mean, it has always been a very high prize for me. I've always tried to seek it out. I remember graduating from college and getting my first job. I grew up very impoverished on a pig farm in a home with no insulation, no running water, outhouse in the back, well on the side, extremely impoverished,
Wow.
and one stop sign town in the deep woods of Alabama. But here I am, first to graduate from college, and now I'm going to work in this for lack of a better definition, just this Wall Street environment with
Mhm.
AG Edwards and Sons, and then Bank of America Capital Asset Management. And I remember walking onto the floor and realizing I don't know how to dress properly for this environment. And I remember I gave my life to the Lord when I was 19. So now I'm out of college. And I remember walking and just saying, God, either bring someone alongside who will mentor me or open up my eyes so that I can see what I need to see. And I think back on that prayer of a very young girl at the time, because God has chosen throughout my life, not so much to bring mentors along, which I would love to have. I think that's a much easier route. But instead, He has chosen that my path is He will teach me, that I will
Mhm.
hold on to His hand and He will guide me. And I see the same thing here. I was asking for wisdom all throughout my own run, working with Vivek, because you're just stepping behind the curtains in the world of politics at a very high level. And I mean, these are some of I've never seen such mediocre people in my life.
Yeah.
These people fail up. They don't fail out and down and out. They have a way of losing election after election after election, and they still rise up.
Yeah.
They're on the
Mhm.
next campaign, right? Before this campaign fails miserably because of them, they're off to the next one, about to deteriorate that. And these people, it just seems so, for lack of a better word, just evil and dark. And these
Yeah.
are horrible people. And I'm not
Mhm.
talking about Democrats. I'm talking about Republicans. And
Yeah.
you're walking in this environment, and I'm like, God, give me wisdom. And I look back now with some time in my rear view, looking back and seeing my own missteps and seeing opportunities, and I feel wiser. Now,
Mhm.
again, I don't know if there's another grand moment for me, but I see a little bit clearer, and I have a little bit more wisdom and understanding. And you're clearly, James, that was not the end for you. Those 2 years in prison, you're married, you look very distinguished, very handsome, you and your beautiful wife. So I don't know you personally, but you look like life is much better than it was, though, coming out of those 2 years. How did God begin to open up those doors? Let me just finish with you, James, and then Bersabeth, I would love to hear yours as well. Because I think there's a lot of people who are down and out. Life is tough. Life is hard.
Mhm.
This world right now, it is oppressive. It causes people to want to be apathetic. It seems like that seems to be, finding ways to numb yourself,
Yeah.
whether vegetating on television or porn or drugs. you're looking for an escape. Life is tough, but what was it for you? Why did you not call it quits? I mean, 2 years in prison, I think I'd be like, "Oh, what's the point?"
Yeah, and I was homeless. When Bersabeth met me, I was not a real attractive prospect. Thank you for your compliments. I was,
I agree with
I
you.
was, I was, I was 54 years of age, sleeping on mom's couch, and I was one of those guys that most dating advisors would say stay away from
Yeah.
by appearances anyway. And so there's three things that Bersabeth and I teach our clients that we work with, and I think I experienced it standing in the desert, $20 million in debt and homeless and broken and alone. First thing, I had to, first of all, ask myself, what's James Arthur Ray 3.0 going to be? Now, that presupposes there's a 2.0 and a 1.0, and those are entirely different stories. But what am I going to be about in James Arthur Ray 3.0? And then here's the three things. And when I came to clarity on that, then how am I responsible for this situation? I believe we have to take 100% responsibility, and that's tough because I could say, well, it's the weaponization of the system. It's the jealousy. It's the media. It's all my friends, turned their back and either stabbed me in the back or just disappeared. I could blame all kinds of things, but I had to ask myself, how am I responsible? And the answer I came up with as I dug deep is that I created myself into a target. If I had not been as big as I was at the time in the media, I wouldn't have been a target. There had been numerous deaths in sweat lodges prior to, and by the way, please understand, I'm not minimizing the three people who died. It broke my heart. It was the antithesis of anything I ever lived for or gave my life for. And yet there'd been numerous deaths in sweat lodges previous to mine. Not one of them had ever been prosecuted as a crime. Not one. Well, why was mine? Because I was a big gorilla who lived in Beverly Hills and was all over the media. And boy, isn't this going to look grand? But I created that for myself. It's like the
So are you
celebrity.
saying that we should strive to live small?
No, not at all. I mean, 1 billion people is big. I believe we should think big and realize that the power that works through us is much, much greater than any power that can come from us. Big difference.
Yeah, I think the mistake is thinking that it's you doing it like you're the God instead of going with, no, God has gifted me and blessed me with this and it's coming through me. So you're the vessel for God to work through you. I think that's where it becomes problematic. That's the switch.
It wasn't that I was, had all those things I've already talked about. There's nothing wrong with that. But what was wrong is what Bersabeth is saying, is in retrospect, I thought, well, I've worked really hard and really long, which I had. It took me 20 years to become an overnight success. And yet it still was gifted to me.
Yeah.
And I don't believe I gave enough credit to God where credit was due to God. I tended to start believing, because people came from 147 countries around the world to ask me how to better their life. And I started getting carried away with it. I started thinking, wow, I got all the answers. And then God is like, okay, answer this one. Boom. Everything's gone. Now see what answers you have.
So one, you asked yourself, what will the 3.0 version of me be? Two, how am I responsible for the situation? Three, you created a target of yourself by not giving God the glory and
the target is part of responsibility.
Okay.
I was responsible because I made it about me too much versus God. And I've never totally disconnected from God, but less perfectly sometimes been connected than others.
Sure.
And God has always been a part of my life, and he's given me an amazing life. And so number two So absolute responsibility. I write about that in my book called The Business of Redemption, which is a chronicle of my whole experience that I'm giving you the crib notes on here today. But number two is, why do I value and think the way I think? Why do I value what I value, and why do I think the way I think? And Bersabeth, I work with a lot of people. And if you're really, really honest with yourself, why was it valuable for me to have a big mansion, an estate in Beverly Hills? When it was ludicrous, 7,500 square feet, there were rooms I never even visited. They were pretty. They were nice to look at, but I didn't use them. And I was a single guy. Why did I value that? Well, the reality is they weren't my values. They were values that were handed to me by socialized mind. And when most of us really boil it down, and we'll realize that we don't think. We think, but we don't think. We're
We're
like,
like automatons. We're
yeah,
like carbon copies of the
Yeah.
person, of those around us, not living in such a way that I'm going to do this because it's going to make others think I'm valuable and I'm important. And, whether we're compensating for how we grew up and what someone may have told us, but I find that to be the case. What about you?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I grew up, I was the kid who was bullied in school, and I was skinny and scrawny and very introverted with a very charismatic, dynamic dad. And so I always felt less than, and that also is part of the outcome of that vertical plane. Why did I want this house in Beverly Hills? Because this vertical plane, the secular world, tells me that's the epitome.
That's important.
That's important. And boy, can't I bring people through and show them what accomplishments I have and what beauty I have surrounded myself with. And so it's all based upon things that have been gifted to us, and most of us are the byproduct of other people's habitual way of thinking.
And
And so,
and I always have to pause and remind myself, and in my talking at God, God, I want this, God, I want this, God, I want that. And then I pause long enough to say, God, I'm so blessed. Thank you so much. Right. My husband adores me. My children are healthy and really good people. Don't have any problems with my children. My son is 18 and he just started driving earlier this year. And he's dropping his sister off at summer camp. He goes to his summer camp program. I leave the house, come right back, and there are 2 police cars in my yard, right? Hard drop on the ground. I get out and the police says there's been a hit and run, and that the driver said it was my son, got his driver's license, everything. My son is on his way to his own summer camp. I call him and I say, "Hey buddy, how you doing? How's everything going?" I'm thinking to myself, now we told him everything, you give your kids all of this instruction. I was like, but I never told him that if you hit someone, you can't keep driving.
Oh no.
So this is me thinking to myself, right? But I'm like, surely he knows that, right? So I'm like, "Hey buddy, how are you doing? How's everything going?" He's like, "Oh, hey mom, I'm almost at my camp and yada yada." I was like, "Hey buddy, tell me, did you by chance happen to hit someone's car when you dropped your sister off?" He was like, "No, mom." I was like, "Buddy, think carefully. Did you do that?" He was like, "Mama, no, I did not." And I said, "Thank you so much, son. Turn around and come back home." Long story short, he came back home. It wasn't my son, right?
Oh.
But what I told my son and what I told the police officer immediately when I got off the phone with my son was that my son said he didn't do it. So I believe my son. And of course, the officer said, "Well, as parents, I'm a parent and we want to believe." I was like, "No, I believe my child."
Yeah.
And when my son came home and we were talking to him, I said, "Buddy, I'm so grateful." Right? Because again, I'm looking for these grand gestures in the world so that other people can see, hey, I'm valuable. But at the end of the day, what matters most? And I said, "Buddy, I'm so grateful for you and for your heart, because you have lived a life in such a way over these past 18 years that I know if you say I did not do it, I can trust that. You've given over 18 years of your life. There's not one time you have given us any kind of like, okay, yeah, he may be lying to us. We don't know who our kid is. And
Mm-hmm.
it's something as small as that, but that is really the biggest thing to know. We're getting ready to drop him off at college, and I feel great, bittersweet. I'm sad because my baby is leaving the
Yeah.
home, but I'm encouraged because we did a good job. My husband and I are high-fiving ourselves. That's what you're talking about, right?
It is. I mean, how many parents can literally say that
True.
that their child tells them something, and hey, I know my child. They don't lie to me because
It's not blind faith, right?
No.
But
no,
it's 18 years you've given us of, I said, baby, you have a resume that goes 18 years now with us.
Yeah.
And there's not one time when you have lied. Now he's a child. He lied on his sister, right? But in life, big things, right?
Yeah.
Even small things. But he's a good boy.
Mhm.
But again, I have to remind myself sometimes that is the goal.
Mhm.
That is the most important thing
Yes.
I can ever do in
Mhm.
my life. But
Mhm.
again, it's not grand. And in our culture, we tend not to put that much weight on it.
Yeah, see, you hit the nail on the head there. It's what our culture has programmed us to feel that way. When in truth and reality, what he is the most important thing that we can do in this world. It really is, because you created that boy. He became a man who's a stand who tells the truth, which is the most important thing. And now he goes out in society and he spreads that into society as well. And
Yeah.
that's how it works. And that is to me, is the most important thing. It's the only thing that matters. Everything else is just the little things that led up to that. And you said that you started like cooking at home as a small thing. I still say it's not a small thing. It's a big thing, because it's those very things that ripple out into what builds a strong, good-hearted, trustful, telling the truth society. And that's the only thing that matters. And that's the only thing that's going to bring us together. That's our humanity in us. When we start lying and being deceptive and using other people, we've lost our humanity and we've degraded ourselves to the animal level. And
But that's where we find ourselves today. The
Yeah.
most, I was reading some report that measuring our children, that I don't know, it was 8 out of 10, their highest goal is to be an influencer.
Yeah.
On Instagram.
Yeah.
Capitalism, right? And we live in a culture where, by any means necessary. We see that with our judicial system. I believe the Democrat Party is weaponizing.
Yes.
And again, I'm not caught up with Democrat, Republican, but it's the easiest. It's the way we tend to think in America today. Republican, Democrat, left, right. But I recognize, as you said earlier, James, is that this battle is not between left and right and Republicans and Democrats. But just for the sake of keeping everyone in line with moving along this conversation, is that it is obvious that the left, the Democrats, the communists, the uniparty, whatever you want to call them, that they are weaponizing our judicial system, because by any means necessary, Donald Trump cannot win again.
That's right.
Right. But it's not, and we'll just do it this one time. And then we'll go back to law and order. No, that won't happen. We are teaching a whole generation, right?
Yeah.
You talk about little children. We homeschooled our kids. I took them out when my daughter was in kindergarten and our son was in second grade, because I saw 10 years ago what most people are just now waking up to, and that is the role of LGBTQAI plus 2 whatever
Elemental
being
P.
taught to our children. Transgenderism. I saw that back then. And
Mm-hmm.
my husband and I reason that these, you know, if these people are allowed to tell our children that I have to wait, Bersabeth, I'm looking at you, you're a beautiful woman. But what if you grow up saying, wait, I have to wait until you tell me who you are. I can't trust myself. I can't trust my own eyes. I
Mm-hmm.
have to wait for you to tell me what to think. And if you tell me you're a woman, then I can use those pronouns and I can address you as a woman, right? And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
my husband and I thought to ourselves, if they are allowed to do that at such a young age, these children are going to grow up one day, and we're going to raise children who become accountants and lawyers and doctors and judicial members and senators and presidents, who have to wait to be told what is real, what is not. You can't trust yourself. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, it may not be physical slavery, but that is slavery
Yes.
nonetheless,
Yes.
because every word starts with the thought. And
Mm-hmm.
if I'm no longer in charge of my own thoughts, well, I'm no longer in charge of my words and how I live and or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely. And that's where it's come to. And that and yeah, if more people do what you did with your kids now, is a step in the right direction. And we need parents to take first, they need to start taking responsibility for themselves. They need to take back what they've given over to the government to depend on and be comfortable, and pick up the pieces and start going. Yeah, life is hard. It's never meant to be easy, and it will never get easy. There is no easy. They've created this idea that we're going to reach a point, you be an influencer and you're going to be happy and just make money and you're going to be happy. And
Live in a
those,
15-minute city, and we'll
yeah,
provide it. You own nothing and be
yeah,
happy.
you own nothing
And
and be happy. And those are all lies. It does nothing but create discontent within us. And when we feel that way, we can't think. We don't think for ourselves. I mean, I haven't, it's fascinating because we work with people to see how they're not able to think about things. Critical thinking. They don't know how to question things. They just do as they've seen and as they've been told. And I think one of the things that is easier for me to do so is because of where I grew up and what I have seen. So I've seen the Jurassic contrast of living somewhere where you're afraid the bomb is going to drop on your house tonight, or are we going to, we're going to die tonight, or are we going to live? To coming to somewhere where you could just go to bed feeling completely safe, not worrying about getting shot or getting bombed on or the military kicking down your door. And I can see we're not too far off from that here in the States. And you tell that to people, they'll be like, whoa, in America, there's no way it's going to come on our soil.
Yeah.
Well,
You're radical. You're far right.
right. And it's very possible that it will come here. And we have to get our head on to, yeah, I mean, it's a very sticky situation that we're in. I mean, one of the things I did, and let me back up. You mentioned transgender and what they're doing kids with sexuality. The one thing you can do to a young individual, to kids, is introduce sex in a perverse way to them. It will completely ruin them for life. And
Yeah.
this is a powerful force, because we say
Yeah.
sex is an acronym for sacred energy exchange, because that's between a man and a woman in marriage. It's supposed to be in God's communion. That's what it's for. And you take that, you break that in a child, their whole life in front of them is completely broken.
Yeah.
And I can speak from that from experience. And yet, there are things you can do for yourself to heal yourself, to become whole again, and to take charge of your life instead of being run with what's being fed to you by the outside sources that do not have your best interests at heart. I mean, it's look at how we worship celebrities. I mean, it's a joke. Celebrities, movies is for our entertainment. That's all they are.
Court jesters.
No.
They're not. I mean, think about, we're here
You know,
to
I mean,
go
you
ahead.
know, let me just double click on something you said, because I think it's worth, people say, and every time I posted it on my Twitter page, and I can't even look at it. Every time I would look at it, I would just get a pit in my stomach. It's this white man looking like Santa Claus, but dressed only in his underwears at a gay pride. And every time, it's kind of like Santa Claus come and wave and all the kids cheer. Well, when all the kids cheer, instead of handing out candy, he would twerk,
Wow.
roll his hips around, right? With just his underwears on, grab his knees, bend over, and just roll. And everybody just go wild. He just kept doing it over and over again. And I started thinking to myself, at such a young age, and we are wiring their mind in such a way where it's so perverse. Who are these children going to grow up to be?
Yeah.
What would their contribution be to our world? How perverted of our values? If we think it's perverted values today,
Mhm.
what would it be when these little minds grow up and now they are our doctors and teachers and lawyers and policymakers?
Mhm.
How can you undo that kind of damage when it starts so young? And there were, at the gay pride parade, children everywhere,
Mhm.
and they're being and the adults are applauding, so the children are applauding. Some of them are standing there very awkward, like, what in the world? But
Right.
how do you put that back in the box for these little minds?
It's a great question, and I want to
Mhm.
digress for a moment to talk about, Bersabeth referenced that she can speak from experience of being sexually abused and at a very, very young age, and what impact that has on a person, and that they tend to be corrupted or broken for life. But she's not broken. So she's living proof that
Mhm.
no matter how broken you think you are, or no matter how perverse you've been programmed, you can put the pieces back together. And that
Hmm.
brings me to number three. It's a great segue. I was telling you there's three things: take full
Yeah.
responsibility. Second, decide why I value what I value and why I think what I think. And number three is, what are the unresolved emotional issues
Yes.
that drive my behavior? And this is the work that we do based around those three things. And everything that we've talked about fits into one of those three categories, including independent thinking. Critical thinking goes with number two. Why do I value and think like I do? But um, psychology tells us that 95% of what you do every single day is driven by your unconscious mind, which means you're operating on 5% of your capabilities. That's not a whole lot. It's kind of like I said earlier, we live in a 5% world, and 95% is vibrating at a frequency we can't perceive. And that's what's happening. And so the most powerful thing we all can do is to make the unconscious conscious. Because when we make the unconscious conscious, then we can look at the blocks, the barriers, the limitations, the programming, and we can heal those things and integrate them and literally set ourselves free. And Bersabeth and I are both living proof of that. And we're not here to suggest that we're totally there. We're not. I don't think you ever
No,
arrive.
you don't.
I think I'll be a lifelong student. I always have been, and I'll
Mhm.
be a work in progress till the day I exit. And yet, when I came out of prison in 2013, I was shattered, and I was bitter, and I had a lot of anger, and I had to heal those things, and I had to integrate those things, and I was totally unaware of a lot of them.
Mm.
And so as we started to do the work, and Bersabeth is very gifted. She's my go-to and I'm her go-to. So we work with each other. There's a lot of times when I say, Bersabeth, hey, something's coming up for me and I'm not really sure why, and I need your help in uncovering it, and vice versa. We do that. And that's what we do with our clients as well. Because what psychology also tells us is that when you go back and revisit a previous event in your life with
Mhm.
new resources and new awareness, maybe a little bit of wisdom, as you mentioned, Book of Proverbs, get wisdom. Wisdom is
Mhm.
the principal thing, you know. Then you can never see it again the same way. You know, when I go back and visit and revisit my whole situation that happened in 2009, I can't view it the way I used to view it because there's so many things.
Yeah.
We are deletion creatures. You know, there's over 2 billion bits of sensory data in our environment right now. You as a viewer, Bersabeth and I, and we can only allow into our nervous system at one time 7 plus or minus 2. That's all well scientifically documented, which means somewhere between 5 and 9 bits of information can we allow in from 2 billion. Well, that leaves a lot left over. That
Mhm.
leaves a lot missed. And so when we go back with more wisdom, more experience, more understanding, then we can maybe see some of those things from a new perspective and a new angle, and we
Mhm.
can heal them
Absolutely.
and integrate them.
Yeah. And I say for those the kids that are being previewed to these things now, the hope for them is either their parents wake up and take their kids out of school. That's how we change the system, is to take the power back. Say, okay, I'm not going to send my kid to school anymore. I'm going to homeschool them. Do what you did. And uh, creating kids like you have with your boy and your daughter, you send those kids into society, that affects these other kids that have been influenced in such a wrong way. Those kids have them to look up to. So what we do in our home is very important. And if it gets to a point where they go down that road and they have a struggle through life and have get into drugs and whatever they do, then you need to do the work to clean it up. It's a lifestyle. Like what we do, how we live, is a lifestyle. We don't watch television, we don't watch movies, we don't listen to just any kind of music. The only music we play in the house is jazz music, because I don't want that garbage going in. And I don't want to see that garbage on TV, because all they do is program you, or scrolling through social media. It's the same thing. What are you reading? What are you eating? What are you feeding your body? This body was a gift. It's called the temple. That this is, God gave you this. It's not yours. You were given this body, so you better take care of it. When you do these things, what happens inside of you is quite magical, because then your soul starts coming to life again. It starts having some power in it. And then things starts to shift and change, and then you get a sense of, wow, I carry this inside of me. I can do things. It gets you out of the mindset of, I need drugs or smoking or alcohol or whatever to
Mhm.
just be able to cope. My driving force, because I was an addict. I did drugs. I smoked cigarettes for 24 years. I drank alcohol. And I wanted nothing more to just be able to sit on the couch and not need anything and just feel normal. I know what that feels like, that people are going through with things like that. And I promise you, if you could do the work to clean up everything that you've gone through and take the steps to it, it's all incremental steps, but in the end, it gives you the result that you can't even imagine. If you would have told me 10 years ago that I would be where I am today and who I am today, I couldn't even fathom it. It was completely out of my it would have been like an overreach of an attention. So it's possible. You have to unplug from everything that's being fed to you. And
A little bit at a time. You don't have to do it. I
right,
mean,
you do a little bit at a time.
I've been on this journey my entire life. You know, I've been in this body 66 years, and
Yeah.
that's a while. And I've been working at it since I was 18.
Hmm.
And so that's a long time. And Bersabeth has been working at it for over a decade at least,
Yeah.
that I know of, because that's how
Hmm.
long we've been together,
Sure.
about
Yeah.
11 years.
Hmm.
But certainly going through a lot of life experiences and doing things on her own prior to that. So incremental. Remember this, and this reflects back, Kathy, on something you said earlier.
Hmm.
I feel like some of the things I'm doing are so small, they're not grand, Well, I feel that way. I feel that way. The phone used to ring off the hook, and I was on the road over 250 days a year. And by the way, it's not that glamorous.
Yeah.
It's not that sexy.
I know it's not.
It really isn't. I
I
couldn't,
know
I
the
couldn't even.
traveling, the
No,
hotels.
I couldn't even get a workout completed. I couldn't have any personal space or get through an airport without getting interrupted. And
Yeah.
and yet I created that. And so I wasn't going to be one of those, you've seen some of these celebrities. All I want is to be left alone. Well, who created the fact that you're not left alone? You did, Bucko. So take some responsibility for it. And so anyway, it's a long time journey, and you have to learn to commit to the process and to the journey and make it enjoyable. But here's the thing, and I would remind every viewer, incremental gains change the world.
Mm-hmm.
How do we change the world? Incrementally.
Yep.
Little by little, we start to wake up. Little by little, we say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to roll up my sleeve and put a bioweapon in my body that's never been tested and has no peer reviewed science behind it just because you tell me that it's safe. Because guess what? You told me if I took it, I wouldn't get COVID. Well, now Anthony Fauci has gotten COVID for the third time, supposedly this week. Did he really get vaccinated? I'm kind of dubious on that one. But nonetheless, that's the story that's going out there. Joe Biden told us if you get COVID, you can't pass it on. Well, that's not a fact either. So pay attention, wake up, and take your power back.
Yeah. Take control of your life instead of
Well, I appreciate both of you. I'm so very grateful that we somehow stumbled into each other's lives and
Yeah.
that you would come and share your stories, share wisdom, which is everything, and some insight. It causes people to hold on, to keep fighting, to keep moving forward. And I believe we all need that at different times, but that we all need it. And so I'm
Yeah.
very, very grateful for the both of you for stopping in. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you for
It's our
having us.
pleasure. Thank you for
Yeah.
having us.
Yeah. And let me say to everyone else, as you see, I know we live in a culture that says we are not to talk about Jesus. We can talk about transgenderism. We can talk about boys changing their being chemically castrated. We can talk about, a whole host of things, but don't mention the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, he came into my life when I was 19 years old, and I am so grateful to him. I
Mhm.
was old enough to see what the path my life was on, and then to give my life to the Lord and to see the path that he created before me. It has not been perfect.
Yeah.
A lot of learning along the way, but wow, my oh my, I am so very grateful that he would take the time to come into my life, and he has truly made the difference. And so I just want to share that with you guys. I know,
Yeah.
in this setting, again, I'm talking about politics and, geopolitical happenings, but, Jesus has been amazing, and life happens. And when it happens, I cannot imagine it happening without me being able to fall upon a rock, and his name is Jesus. So to each and every one of you, please share this. I know this one was a long one, but it was good. Blessings. James and Bersabeth, please stay right there. But to everyone else, blessings.
God bless.